Welcome to my channel. 1978. Los Alfaques disaster. It was a warm sunny day on July 11, 1978 in Spain. On that day, a tanker truck owned by Cisternas Reunidas S.A., driven by 50-year-old Francisco Imbernon Villena, arrived at the Petrol refinery, 9 kilometers north of Tarragona. The tanker was then loaded with propylene. It was at 12:05 that the tanker would leave the refinery carrying 23,470 kilograms of propylene, almost 4 tons over the maximum load allowed. The driver had been instructed to take a small road instead of using the large A7 motorway, when he was traveling to Barcelona. This was so that the motorway toll could be avoided. The N340 road was narrow and had to go through several populated areas. It was around 2:35 p.m., when the tanker moved past Los Alfaques campsite. Witnesses to the disaster report seeing the tanker leaking as it was coming up to the campsite and heard a loud bang, while other witnesses claim the loud bang was a tire blowout, which caused the tanker to swerve out of control, hitting the wall at the campsite. The leaking tanker caused a cloud of gaseous propylene to spread across the campsite and head towards a discotheque situated northeast of the area. Campers were intrigued by the cloud and came in to take a look. These campers were unaware of the impending danger. The cloud would go on to reach the discotheque, where it is believed to have found an ignition source. As soon as this happened, it flashed back to the tanker, causing a fire, which ruptured an already weak-kneed tanker, and ignited the contents inside. A huge blast and fireball spread, destroying everything in its path, and gutted most of the main camping area. It happened so quickly, that campers were unable to get to safety. The discotheque was also affected, and all staff members located inside were killed. Vehicles and tents were either completely destroyed or charred. A restaurant in the area also partially collapsed, and the area was a scene of complete devastation. The tanker had blocked the road, so injured people were transported to different hospitals in the area. Survivors and local residents in the area helped transport the injured to hospital. The civil guard was called into aid in searching the campsite for any survivors. Many of those people injured had sustained around 90-degree burns over their bodies. A lot of those injured would pass away during the following days. There are conflicting reports into how many people died in the disaster. The official number was 215, but it is believed that it could be closer to 270. Many of the injured passed away in the months after the disaster, and many patients were flown back home to be treated further. Many of the victims had been burned beyond recognition, with many of them just wearing swimsuits in the hot sunshine. There was no DNA testing available at the time, and forensic teams worked hard to get the victims identified and brought back home to their loved ones. All victims would eventually be identified, but this took a long time. For one French couple and their children, their remains would not be returned back to France for several years. An investigation began into the disaster. How could this have happened? The investigators discovered that the tanker was overloaded and lacked an emergency pressure release valve. They also found that the overloading of tankers was common practice at petrol refineries. It was also discovered that the tanker drivers were never informed that their tanker was overloaded. Cisternas Reunidas accepted responsibility for the disaster, but claims that they did not tell their drivers to take the alternative route. It was in 1982 that 4 employees of Petrol and 2 employees at Cisternas were convicted of criminal negligence. They were sentenced to prison between 1 to 4 years. However, 4 of the employees were released after appealing, and eventually all prison sentences were suspended or reduced. The 2 companies involved would eventually pay compensation to all those involved. It wasn't long after the disaster that vehicles carrying dangerous cargo was prohibited in populated areas of Spain, and could only be driven during the night. It was just 6 months after the tragedy that the campsite was reopened to campers once again. For these poor holiday makers, their holiday turned into tragedy, and some did not make it back home alive. Our hearts go out to the relatives of the victims, and to those survivors who were left affected by this disaster. May you never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel to view other content.